January 2nd, 2026, Buddha Dhamma, chapter 11.3, part 1, pages 1075 to 1098. Wise enjoyment of sense pleasure. Point A, diverse grades of sukha, happiness. Gautama Buddha stated that he had realized the sublime happiness dependent on sensuality, kama. And for this reason, he could assert that he would not circle back to seek out sense pleasures again. He had not experienced this sublime happiness, sukha. One would not have been able to make such an assertion. Gautama Buddha then went on to say that even though the noble disciple may clearly discern with right panya, right wisdom and sense pleasures, has little sweetness and much dukkha, much suffering, much affliction and danger. If he was not yet experienced the sublime bliss and happiness independent of sensuality, then could not yet say with confidence that he would not revert back to search of sense pleasure. Similarly, he warned the monks in particular that if someone who has gone forth has not yet savored the sublime bliss and happiness independent of sensual pleasures, it is still possible for various defilements like covetousness, ill will, restlessness, laziness, boredom, to overwhelm the mind. Such a person will not delight in the holy life, or will not be able to endure living the holy life. Apart from demonstrating the importance Buddhism gives to happiness, these references also reveal how noble disciples do not abandon sense desires, because sensuality is void of pleasure, because Buddhism teaches to abstain from pleasure. Buddhism acknowledges pleasure and happiness as it truly exists. It encourages people to practice in order to achieve happiness and to recognize the sensuality comprised one from happiness. Noble disciples abandon sense desires because they see that despite the inherent pleasures of sensuality is still mixed up with a great deal of suffering, dukkha, and importantly, there's more profound form of happiness, exceeding that sense pleasure, exceeding the pleasure derived from consuming various delightful objects in the world. Noble disciples abandon sense desires because they have savored this more refined form of happiness. There are thus different levels of happiness, sukha. Here we can examine how Buddhism classifies sukha. The Dukkha Nipata of the Anguttara Nikaya separates sukha into various kinds of degrees, providing a long list of pairs, including the happiness of householders and the happiness of renunciants, the happiness of sensuality and the happiness of renunciants, mundane happiness and transcendent happiness, and the happiness of noble beings, and the happiness of ordinary beings. A clear, detailed classification of various levels of sukha, happiness, is the teachings on the 10 levels of sukha, 10 levels of happiness, which is found in many places in the Dipitaka. Kama, sense pleasure, joy, happiness, dependent on the 5 chords of sensuality, kama guna. Now, it's good to note the word kama is not restricted to the narrow, commonly understood definition of sensual desire or sexual desire. Objects of sensuality, kama guna, refer to all beautiful sights, sounds, fragrance, odors, delicious tastes, and delightful tangible objects. Without exception, they include all things providing material pleasure, amisa sukha. Therefore, even renunciants, monks, siddhis, may be caught up in enjoying objects of sense pleasures. And secondly, Pata Jana Sukha, happiness of the first concentration absorption, jhana. Happiness of the first jhana, which is removed from sensuality and unwholesome states that is comprised of initial and sustained thought, vitaka or vichara. Bliss, piti, happiness, sukha, and one-pointedness, ikajata. Third, happiness of the second concentration absorption, tuti jhana sukha, happiness of the second jhana, which is comprised of piti, sukha, and ikajata. That means bliss, happiness, and one-pointedness. The fourth, happiness of the third concentration absorption, tatiya jhana sukha, happiness of the third jhana, which is comprised of sukha, happiness, and one-pointedness, ikaja. Fifth, happiness of sakhu jhana sukha, of the fourth concentration absorption, the fourth jhana, which is comprised of upeka, equanimity, and ikajata, one-pointedness. The sixth, happiness of the attainment of the sphere of unbounded space, akasana chayatana sammapati sukha, in this concentration attainment of one transcended the perception of form, rupa sanya, and the perception of repulsion, patika sanya. One who pays no attention to the perception of diversity, nattata sanya. One directs attention solely on the infinity of space. The seventh kind of happiness, happiness of the attainment of the sphere of unbounded consciousness, vijnana cha ayatana sammapati sukha. In this concentrative attainment, one meditates on the infinity of consciousness as one object of attention. The eighth, happiness of the attainment of the sphere of nothingness, akinna cha ayatana sammapati sukha. In this concentrative attainment, one meditates on the state of nothingness as one's object of attention. The ninth, happiness of the attainment of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, neva sanya ayatana sammapati sukha. And finally, the 10th kind of happiness is happiness associated with the attainment of nirodha, cessation of perception and feeling. Sanya veta nirodha sammapati sukha. So those are the 10 kinds of happiness. It is possible to abbreviate these 10 kinds of happiness into 3 levels. The first level is happiness associated with sensuality, kama sukha. The second level is happiness associated with jhana. Jhana is concentration absorptions, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Or happiness associated with the 8 concentration of attainment, atta sammapati sukha, which can be further divided into 2 subcategories. Happiness associated with the 4 fine material jhanas, and happiness associated with the 4 formless jhanas. There are pairs. The third level is happiness associated with the attainment of cessation, nirodha sammapati. Now, all these aforementioned kinds of happiness are acknowledged as constituting happiness, but they are seen as representing gradually more refined and superior forms of happiness. The initial kinds of happiness still contain harmful aspects and are tied up with suffering. The higher forms of happiness are more refined and pure. The Tipitaka teaches to recognize these kinds of happiness as they truly are, both their pleasurable aspect and those aspects tied up with suffering, both their advantages, asata, positive aspect, and disadvantages, atitnawa, negative aspects. So asata is the positive, atitnawa is the negative aspects. Both their merits and dangers, moreover, they reveal the way out, the escape, ni sarana, ni pana, their escape, the freedom from all conditioned states of happiness, which is independent of both advantages and disadvantages. When one sees the dangers of coarser forms of happiness, one has become disenchanted by them and aspires toward more refined happiness. When one has witnessed one's self-refined form of happiness, one abandons the coarser forms and seeks ever more sublime happiness. At the very least, it will not be overly engrossed in the coarse pleasures. Whenever people are liberated in decisive way of bonds of mental defilements, kilesas, have been utterly severed, they will never return to seek out coarser forms of happiness. They will experience only the refined happiness correspondent to the liberated mind. Experiencing these gradually more refined forms of happiness is one attribute of making progress in the Dhamma practice. The second point, B, is sense pleasures and superior forms of happiness. Following are some teachings that help clarify the aforementioned subject material. Here we quote monks. There are 5 chords of sensual pleasures, kama guna, forms cognizable by the eye, sounds cognizable by the ear, odors cognizable by the nose, tastes cognizable by the tongue, tangibles cognizable by the body that are desirable, alluring, likewise and agreeable, attractive and provocative of lust. These are the 5 chords of sense pleasures. Now the happiness and joy that arises dependent on these 5 chords of sense pleasures is the gratification, asata, in the case of sense pleasures. The happiness and joy is called sense pleasures, kama sukha. The term kama refers to 2 things: alluring material objects, vatu kama, desirable objects, and the desires of mental impurity, kilesa kama, mental defilements that breeds desire. What are the alluring material objects? Pleasing visible forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and tangible objects. Rugs, blankets, female and male servants, goats, sheep, chickens, pigs, elephants, cows, horses, donkeys, rice paddies, land, silver, gold, houses, villages, royal towns, states, countries, armies, and royal treasuries. Whatever material objects are the basis for attachments are called alluring material objects. Furthermore, all objects of desire existing in the past, present, and future, existing internally, externally, or both internally and externally, those that are base, middling, and superior, those belonging to beings in unhappy states of existence, belonging to human beings, and belonging to the celestial realms. Those are immediately at hand. Pachupati patita. Those are self-created. The self-created is called nimitta. And those who are created by others, paranimitta. Those owned and those not owned. Those coveted and those not coveted. Those that belong entirely to the sense sphere, kama varavachara. And those who belong entirely to the formless spheres, arupa vachara, which are the base for craving, tanha, the objects for craving, tanha. They are called the objects of desire, tanha, on account of being the basis for desire, tanha. On account of being the basis for infatuation, all these are called alluring material objects. What is the desire as mental impurity? Delight in desire, lust in desire. Lustful attachment is desire. Purpose, sankappa, is desire. Lust preoccupation is desire. Central desire, kama chanta. Central lust, kama raja. Central delight, kama nati. Central craving, kama tanha. Central attachment, kamasenaha, passion for sensual pleasure, infatuation for sensual pleasure, obsession with sensual pleasure, sense desire engulfing the mind, sense desire binding the mind, grasping, upatana, to sensual pleasures, the hindrance of sensual pleasures, sense desire in the phrase, look here, sense desire, I see your origin. You arise from setana, from intention. I will no longer be preoccupied with you. By doing this, you will remain no longer. All these are called the desire as mental impurity. Monks, the conception of an embryo in a womb takes place through the union of three things. When there is the union of the mother and the father, and the mother's seasons in being to be reborn is present, through the union of these three things, the conception of the embryo is in the womb takes place. The mother then carries the embryo in her womb for 9 to 10 months with great risk to her life as a heavy burden. And at the end of the 9 or 10 months, the mother gives birth and great risk to her life. As a heavy burden, she then nourishes the newborn child with her own blood. For the mother's breast milk is called blood in the noble one's tradition. A young infant child laying on his back plays even with his own urine and feces. What do you think? Isn't that completely amusing for that infant child? Yes, venerable sir. Sometimes later, when the child grows up and his faculties mature, he plays the games that are typically for children. Games with toys and plows, stick games, somersault games, and pinwheels. Games with measures made of sand, games with toy chariots. Games with toy bows. What do you think? Isn't that amusement superior and more refined than the former kind? Yes, venerable sir. At a still later time, as the boy continues to grow, his faculties mature still further. He enjoys himself endowed with 5 objects of sense pleasures. Pleasures with forms, sounds, odor, tastes, tangibles that are desirable, alluring, likewise and pleasing, attractive and provocative of lusts. What do you think? Isn't this amusement superior and more refined than the former kind? Yes, venerable sir. Among the householders, the most exalted person in the universal emperor, Sakavati, the wheel-turning monarch, who wields supreme power and is replete with material wealth. According to Buddhism, such a person is also endowed with superior virtue. A universal emperor is thus considered to have the great amount of happiness, greater than that generally expected by other human beings. Gautama Buddha referred to this happiness as universal monarch in order to describe the most complete form of ordinary human happiness and to compare it with various other levels of degrees of happiness, revealing their relative subtlety and profundity. According to the ideal depiction, a universal emperor possesses 7 treasures, ratana, 4 kinds of success, iti, and 7 treasures are as follows. First, a precious will signifying righteousness, legitimate sovereignty. It enables the emperor to extend the empire of peace across the entire continent, reaching the oceans in all 4 directions by using righteous methods sustained by the delight of those who accept his rules. Second, a precious elephant which is able to transport the emperors across the entire continent quickly in order to inspect the royal domain. Third, a precious horse which is likewise able to transport the emperor across the entire continent quickly in order to inspect the royal domain. Fourth, a precious and powerful gem which radiates lights across great distances, enabling the emperor to move his troops at night or to have citizens on the land work at night as if they were daytime. Fifth, a precious queen who, besides having a beautiful body and complexion surpassing all other women, also possess a marvelous touch, described as gentle and soft as cotton or down, When cold, her body warms. When hot, her body cools. Her fragrance is as sweet as sandalwood. Her breath is like the scent of a lotus. Moreover, she speaks pleasing words and knows how to minister to all wishes of the emperor. 6. A precious treasurer who possesses the divine eye. He is able to spot sources of wealth in all places, is able to find as much gold and silver as the emperor desires. And 7th, a precious advisor who possesses exceptional talent at rulership. Apart from offering correct counsel on official matters, he is able to direct all sorts of work, projects, and issue royal decrees in place of the emperor. The emperor's 4 kinds of success are as follows. First, his outward appearance is more handsome and majestic than all of other men. Second, his lifespan is longer than all of other people. Third, he is healthy and strong with few illness. Fourth, his subjects are loyal to him. They love him like children that love their parents, and he loves them as a father that loves his children. When he travels outside of the palace, the people receive him and wish to spend as much time as possible with him. He too wishes to spend time with them. The happiness and pleasure of such an emperor is superior to that of other people, including the young men referred to as the previous quotation. Nevertheless, Gautama Buddha said that however great the happiness of the universal emperor, it is paltry, even inconsequential, when compared to the happiness of the celestial realms. It is similar to comparing a small stone the size of one's palm to the towering Himalayas. Although divine happiness, Dipa Sukha, is an elevated form of sensual pleasure, greatly exceeding the sense pleasure of human beings, there exists a happiness more sublime than this. Such a later form of sublime happiness is independent on sensuality and external forms of gratification. Those who have experienced it feel no envy or desire when they see someone else who is enjoying abundant pleasure, sense pleasure. This similar to the central beings or celestial beings. Who feel no envy or delight in inferior happiness of human beings. Moreover, these individuals have no yearning for the divine happiness because they have experienced a superior form of happiness. In this context, Gautama Buddha recounted his own experience. So too, Magga Niya, formerly when I lived the home life, I enjoyed myself. Provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure with form, sound, fragrances, tastes, tangible objects, and desirable, alluring, likable, and pleasing, attractive and provocative lust. I had 3 palaces, one for the rainy season, one for the winter, and one for the summer. I lived in the rains palace for 4 months of the rainy season, enjoyed myself with the musicians who were all female, and I did not have to step out of the palace for 4 months. On the latter occasion, having understood as they actually are the origin, the transience, the gratification, the danger, and the escape of the case of sensual pleasures, I abandoned tanha, craving for sensual pleasures. I dispelled the fever for sense pleasures, and I abide without thirst, with a mind inwardly at peace. I see other beings who are not free from lust, from sensual pleasures, being devoured by tanha, craving for sensual pleasures, burning with fever for sensual pleasures, indulging in sensual pleasures. I do not envy them, nor do I delight therein. Why is that? Because I delight in the happiness apart from the sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states. Therefore, I do not envy what is inferior, nor do I delight therein. Suppose, Magga Diya, a householder or a householder's son was rich with great wealth and prosperity and property, being provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, he might enjoy himself. Having conducted himself, he might reappear in happy destination in the heavenly world, in the retinues of gods, of the 33. And there, surrounded by the groups of nymphs, in the Nagata grove, He would enjoy himself, provided and endowed with the five chords of divine sensual pleasure. Suppose he saw a householder or a householder's son enjoying himself, provided and endowed with five chords of sense pleasure. What do you think? Would that young god envy the householder or the householder's son for the five chords of sensual pleasure, delight in the five chords of human sensual pleasure, or be nostalgic for human sensual pleasure? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because heavenly sensual pleasures are more excellent and sublime than human sense pleasure. So too, Magadhiya, I do not envy them, nor do I delight therein, because I delight in the happiness apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, which surpasses divine beings. Therefore, I do not envy any inferior happiness, nor I delight therein. Point C, the dangers and drawbacks of sense pleasures. What is kama? As indicated at the quotation above, the term kama has two definitions. First, it can mean desire, affection, lust, or yearning. Second, it can mean object of desire, object of affection, object of lust, object of yearning, object of gratification, something that stimulates pleasure, something that provides comfort. The second definition refers to any person, living being, material wealth, person belonging, etc., which people possess or hold on to in order to derive pleasure. In sum, these objects are classified as the five strands of sensuality: kama guna, sights, sounds, smell, tastes, and tangibles that are desirable, that provide sense pleasures. Kama sukha. Sense pleasure is dependent on the five senses and dependent on material things. It cannot also be referred to as carnal pleasure or as material happiness. Samisa sukha, amisa sukha. There are many kinds of degrees of pleasure, including exalted and divine kinds of pleasures, all of which are recognized as a form of happiness. Here we shall focus on the flaws of sense pleasures and the advantages of supreme happiness. We may ask why people, those who have experienced more refined happiness, claim that it is superior to sense pleasure, and even relinquish sense pleasures altogether. The dangers and the drawbacks of kama. Here both definitions of this terms are combined. Desire and objects of desire can be looked at from three angles: in relation to an individual, in relation to kama itself, and in relation to social behavior of people indulging in sensuality. In terms of an individual, one can witness how people, through an improper relationship to sense objects, generate suffering within themselves by behaving incorrectly in relation to the world around them. They make things into objects of the desire and cause themselves misery. In terms of kama itself, one can discern the flaws of those things sought after by people. One can discern the flaws of inherent in the enjoyment of gratification derived from these things. In terms of people's behavior, one can see how those people who seek out and indulge in sense pleasures act in relation to society. Note that although these three aspects can be distinguished, they are in fact interconnected. First, the individual. Here, the focus is on the process of creating dukkha, suffering, in line with dependent origination, in line with the cause and conditions, patisamuppada. This begins with cognitions of various sense objects, followed by erroneous mental attitude towards these things. A person continually allows the stream of events to follow the path of avijja, ignorance, and tanha, craving, until the process becomes habitual. One calls this a habitual predilection for dukkha, for suffering, or a propensity for causing problems. Gautama Buddha mentioned this process in this description of human development, beginning with conception in the womb until the person grows up as an adult. As part of this development, what's quoted above here, we continue this description. When a child grows up and his faculties mature still further, he enjoys himself provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. On seeing the form with the eye, he lusts after it as if he was pleasing. He dislikes it as if it is displeasing. On hearing a sound, on smelling an odor, on tasting a flavor, on touching a tangible object, on cognizing a mind object, he lusts after it as it is pleasing. He dislikes it as if it's displeasing. He abides with the mindfulness of body unestablished. With a limited mind, and he does not understand that this actually is the deliverance of the mind, the deliverance of panya, wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states, akusala dhamma, already arisen, cease without remainder. Engaged, as he is in pleasure and aversion, whatever feeling he feels, whatever pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant, he is engrossed in that feeling, devoted to it, and preoccupied with it. He does so, delighted arises in him. Now delight for feeling, transforming into clinging, upatana. With this clinging as condition, with upatana as the condition, there is becoming, bhava. With becoming as condition, bhava, there is birth, jati. With birth as condition, jati, there is aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair. Such is the origin of the whole mass of dukkha. Second, kama itself. Here one focuses on the flaws of the desires of sense and the objects of sense desire. Gautama Buddha frequently used the following analogies to demonstrate how kama provides relative little satisfaction. Instead, it creates much affliction and danger. Sense desire is similar to an exalted and starving dog who is thrown a bone covered with blood. It will gnaw on the bone until it is tired and weak, without real satisfaction or fulfillment. Sense desire is similar to a vulture or a hawk with a piece of meat in the mouth. Other raptors will swoop down and mob to snatch the meat away. People have no absolute ownership over material things. Others can snatch them away. Many different people desire the same object, giving rise to rivalry, conflict, oppression, and even killing. If one does not know how to relate responsibly towards sense object, one will experience distress and torment. Sense desire is similar to a person holding a flaming grass torch walking upwind. Before long, he will have to throw the torch down, or else his hands, his arms, his body will be burned, leading to severe injuries or even death. Sense desire is similar to a blazing pit of coal. Someone who cherishes his life knows that if he falls into it, he would die or be severely injured or burned. He does not want to fall in, but a strong man grabs him by the arms and gradually drags him towards the pit. Sense objects are similar to a radiant and beautiful dream. Before long, the images fade and disappear. Upon waking, one sees nothing and is left with a feeling of anguish. Sense objects are similar to a borrowed possession, which a person shows off in order to appear fancy and smart. Other people will admire them, but will only be able to possess them temporarily with a sense of doubt. One has no true ownership over them. Whatever the true owner, the true nature, asks for them back, one must return them. There is no compromise. All that a person is left with is his or her body and mind. What is constantly subject to rising and passing away, Since objects are similar to a tree at the end of the forest, bearing abundant fruit, those people who passes by and desire the fruit will use whatever means at their disposal to acquire it. Those who are able to climb the tree to gather the fruit, while those who cannot will use other means. If they are foolish or evil-minded, they will cut the entire tree down. If those people up to the tree do not get down in time, the tree will fall on them, leading to injury or even death. Since objects are similar to chopping block, meddling with them is tantamount to risking losing one's life by being chopped or slashed. Since objects are similar to a spear or a lance, they tend to stab and pierce, wounding one and causing injury. Since objects are similar to the head of a snake, if one is exposed to it, one must always live in distrust. One is unable to truly feel secure or at ease. The snake can at any time pierce one in a constant state of danger. Now, there is a description of the 7 stages of these analogies, and other references gives a list of 10 analogies. Furthermore, the disadvantages of flaws of kama can be summarized as follows. Objects of sense pleasures are only to provide a desirable sweetness, detectability, and enjoyment for the short duration that one is experiencing them. But these objects, when they are related to incorrectly, end up inflicting acute pain and distress for a long time. Moreover, the fading and passing away of the enjoyment may cause sadness and torment, leading to long-standing grief. In the third context, social behavior. And an examination of this disadvantage of sense desire begins with the suffering, hardship, and adversity inherent in earning a livelihood and seeking material objects to use and consume. Everyone must endure the hardships of climate and physical and material fatigue in earning and living. Some people are so impoverished that they lose their lives in the search of material things. Other people make great effort in their work, struggling with obstacles and exhaustion, but are unsuccessful. They make no money and they go bankrupt, resulting in grief and anguish. Even when one obtains such things, there is a suffering in trying to protect them. Some people experience such misfortunes as having their possessions stolen by thieves or incinerated by fire, causing them additional distress. When ignorant people obtain material possessions, they are and get enslaved to them, proud of their possessions, which are ultimately illusory and have no inherent lasting existence. They look down on others, thus increasing the woes of society. Some people are jealous of others people's possessions, leading to disputes, competition, and various forms of oppression. This interpersonal conflict is illustrated in the passage from the Tipitaka. Kings dispute with kings, nobles dispute with nobles, Brahmins dispute with Brahmins, merchants dispute with merchants, mothers dispute with their children, children dispute with their mothers, fathers dispute with their children, children dispute with their fathers, brothers dispute with their brothers, sisters dispute with their brothers, brothers dispute with their sisters, friends dispute with friends. This conflict can spill out into physical fighting and even murder. Spurred on by various personal interests and fueled by sense desire, people take up arms and engage in war, shooting, stabbing, and bombing one another. Likewise, they engage in various forms of immoral behavior, like theft, burglary, adultery, and rape. When they are caught, they receive various kinds of punishments. And when they die, they must experience further torment in planes of misery bad destination, lower worlds, and hellish realms. All these action and results are due to sense desire. Those who discern the aforementioned disadvantages and dangers of sense desire, kama, and those who have experienced a superior state of happiness, sukha, to the point of no longer hankering after objects of sensual enjoyment, also sees in the true nature of sense pleasure, kama sukha. Gautama Buddha explains the matter by using another analogy as follows. Imagine a person with leprosy, whose body is deeply infected by the disease and covered with lesions. He uses his fingernails to scratch the scabs, and for relief, he burns his flesh over a charcoal pit. At a later time, a doctor cures him of this illness, enabling him to live at ease and move about as he wishes. He sees other people suffering from leprosy, who scratch their wounds, cauterize their flesh, and take medicine for their illness. But he feels no delight or gladness in respect to these people. This is similar to those who formerly indulge in objects of sense pleasures. When they latter abandon craving for sense pleasures and experience an internal peace and happiness that is independent of sensuality and superior even to divine pleasures, they feel no delight or hankering when they see others indulging in sense pleasures. If a strong person were to grab someone who has recovered from leprosy and drag him towards a fire pit, he would struggle to escape because of the heat of the fire. The contact with the fire is now considered painful, whereas formerly, when he had leprosy, he would seek out the same hot fire voluntarily to grill his flesh. He considered that contact pleasurable. This is because a person afflicted with leprosy has damaged faculties, leading to inverted or perverse perception. Sanya viparita. In the face of the fire, experiencing pain as pleasure, so too it is with sensuality. In truth, all forms of sensuality entail painful contact that are marked by burning and agitation. People are ordinarily infected by tanha, craving for sensuality, kamaguna. However, and possesses damaged and faulty faculties, giving rise to warped perceptions about sensuality. Experience the actual pain as pleasure. It is worthy to consider the degree that the frequency of pleasure and pain resulting from contact by way of the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the body. The more a leper scratches and burns his lesions, the dirtier and more putrid they become. His happiness and delight stems from scratching his wounds, or exists at the point of the wound that is being scratched. As long as he is not cured from this itch, he will be unable to know if it's a superior kind of happiness. He will be caught up in scratching. How can one introduce him to a happiness that does not involve scratching the itch? When he is cured from this illness and is healthy, he will be able to know a superior form of happiness. And from then on, he will not desire the pleasure derived from scratching an itch. The same is true in respect to sense pleasure when those people marred by tanha or kamaguna for sensuality experiences sense pleasure for craving intensifies. Moreover, their happiness and delight in derived from the limited from the 5 objects of sense pleasure, if they are still not cured from the infection and inflammation of craving for sensuality, it would not be possible for them to know a superior, more refined kind of happiness. In this agitated state, how can one get them to experience the internal happiness independent of external sense objects? But when one craving for sensuality do no longer gnaw away at them, and they are freed from the provocations of sense desires, they'll be able to experience a sublime internal happiness. This is referred to as a freedom from disease, an absence from mental disturbance, a perfect mental health, which is the determination and definition for nipita. This is the summary and explanation from the section contained in the Maggadika Sutra. In this sutra, the focus is on the different forms of happiness, begins with sense pleasures, and moves directly to the state of nipita, nibbana or nirvana, potato, tomato, patata. There is no explicit mention of happiness of jhana, concentration absorption, jhana sukha. The state of concentration absorption jhana, however, is described as nipita, indirectly, or in some respects, pariyaya. It has some similar characteristics. For more on this subject, see the chapter 6 on nipita. In the Sakka Sutta, the Gautama Buddha converses with a group of Sakyan householders. After being questioned, the Sakyans acknowledge that someone who makes his living righteously and abstains from anything unwholesome, and who has the result to earns half a coin, a single coin, 2 coins, all the way up to 5 coins per day, is worthy to be called an enterprising person. Yet even if such an enterprising person were to save up his earnings for 100 years, amassing a large quantity of wealth, this wealth would not be able to provide him with pure, uninterrupted happiness for a single day or even a half day, because objects of sense pleasures are impermanent, insubstantial, without any lasting reality, subject to disappearance and decay. This differs from those who practice according to Gautama Buddha teachings, and who attain the fruit enabling them to abide in pure, unadulterated happiness for long periods of time. I'm going to leave off there today from the end of part 1. So that's 11.3, chapter 11, page 1075 to 1093. Part 1, the end of part 1.